We're getting you caught up on the latest New York Giants free agency activity, plus what's left to do. And we hear from your boy Q, who tells us a little bit about new Giants offensive lineman Jermaine Eluemunor. That's all coming your way next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. My name is Patricia Traina, P-Train, credentialed member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for Giants Country over on the Fan Nation Network. And a special hello and shout out to my Blue Crew community members, my everydayers, my newcomers, and everybody in between. You're all appreciated and loved. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day, or if you watch on YouTube, your first watch of the day. And on today's Locked On Giants podcast, the Giants got busy again. Not quite as busy as the first day of the legal free agency tampering period, but they've been busy. They've been keeping me busy, folks. I haven't been sleeping too much, as I'm sure you could probably tell by the circles under my eyes, but it's all good because that means we've got things to talk about. The Giants, with some additional free agents, acquisitions, some guys that they retain, we'll talk about that. Then what's left for the Giants to do? We'll talk a little bit about that. And then coming up in segment 3, we're going to hear from your boy Q, who is our Locked On Raiders host, and he's going to tell us what we need to know about Jermaine Eluemunor, the offensive lineman, the other offensive lineman that the Giants picked up in free agency. So we got a jam-packed show. And again, as always, thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe if you watch on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and ring that little bell for notifications anytime I post a new video. You will be amongst the first to learn of it. All right, let's get to it. We got a lot to talk about. All right, so I mentioned Jermaine Eluemunor, who we're going to talk about a little later with your boy Q, but I just want to talk real quickly about where he potentially fits in, because you look at the way the Giants offensive line is taking shape. So you've got Andrew Thomas is going to be the left tackle. We know that. John Michael Schmitz is going to be the left guard. The center. We know that. John Runyon Jr. is probably going to be one of the guards, probably right guard, I would think. Evan Neal is penciled in at right tackle. And over at the left guard spot, it looks like it's going to be a competition there amongst different guys, including Joshua Zudu and Marcus McKethan. So where does Jermaine Eluemunor fit in? Folks, I'm saying it now. Even though the Giants have said that Evan Neal is the right tackle, there's going to be a competition there. There has to be. You cannot just hand the job to Evan Neal. So the beauty of the offensive linemen that the Giants have acquired between Jermaine Eluemunor and John Runyon Jr. is they have position flexibility, which is what Carmen Basillo, the new offensive line coach, is looking for. So that being said, they can go into training camp and say, for example, okay, John, you're going to be our projected right guard. Germaine, you're going to be competing for right tackle. But you're going to see them mix and match guys, which is what they did last year. The problem is with last year, they kind of took it right up to week 1 instead of finally making a decision. So you're going to see a lot more competition on that offensive line. And by the way, I still don't think they're done adding to that offensive line. I would not be surprised if they add another player there, whether it be a young player for depth or, maybe a free agent on the back end of free agency. But, they still need to add, I think, to that spot, that position group. And I think they will. So Jermaine Eluemunor, of course, one of the free agents that we didn't talk about the other day. Another guy that the Giants added is Isaiah McKenzie, who is a wide receiver return specialist. Now, some people, when I posted it on Twitter that they had agreed to terms with Isaiah McKenzie, said, well, wait a minute, they just re-signed Gunnar Olszewski. What do they need McKenzie for? McKenzie is a guy who can give you snaps in the slot, can play outside a little bit for you. But where I think he fits in is going to be as a kickoff returner. That is something that the Giants really haven't had a decent threat for. All right. Gunnar Olszewski is not a kickoff returner. Now, some of you are probably saying, well, with the NFL rules being what they are, kickoff's going away anyhow. Well, until it's fully gone, they need somebody who can maybe, take the ball at the goal line or a yard deep or so and get it out to at least the 25. And they haven't really done that. They've lagged in the kickoff return area. So McKenzie, I think, is going to compete for that. He could also be a utility receiver. Now, what I'm curious to see, since the Giants seem to like to stack up on receivers, and since this is a deep receiver class, is how many receivers they end up keeping. Because you figure, okay, Olszewski is listed as a receiver. He'll probably make the team, but he's going to be a special teamer. McKenzie, if he makes the team, he would be a special teamer primarily with, and maybe give you a few snaps here and there on offense. So I do think they could potentially keep two receivers who are purely special teams, because as we've seen many times, once you get to the fourth, fifth, and sixth receivers on a roster, those guys are usually special teamers. But what I'm curious to see is, okay, so they have Darius Slayton right now, Wan'Dale Robinson, Jalen Hyatt. Those are your first three receivers that are projected. You figure they're probably going to look to add a number one receiver in the draft. So if they add a fourth guy now, do they bump somebody from the first three? Do they bump maybe McKenzie? That's going to be interesting to see, and that's going to obviously have to play out before we can see what they do. But, hopefully the Giants don't sign 50 million receivers like they did last year. That was kind of, wacky, I thought. All right. Who else did the Giants add? They added defensive back Jalen Mills, who I believe played with the Patriots and also had snaps with the Eagles. Now, Jalen Mills came into the league, I think he was a cornerback by trade, but the last year he was primarily a safety. Is he necessarily the replacement for Xavier McKinney? I wouldn't go that far. I really wouldn't. I think we're going to see there, first off, the Giants needed to get some veteran depth there. They definitely needed to get some veteran depth. And I think what the plan is there is he's going to, work in. He'll compete with Dane Belton. Dane Belton, I think, is has the inside track to replace McKinney. But you're going to see Jalen Mills compete with him. And whoever doesn't win that role, that starting job next to Jason Pinnock, will probably be like a dime back in the defense. So Jalen Mills, I like the pickup. Yeah, he's a little older than Xavier McKinney, maybe not as versatile, but he's a solid pickup. And, they definitely needed to add there. And that also eliminates, I think, the potential need of drafting a safety. So that was a good pickup. All right, a few notes on the Giants' own restricted free agents. Nick McLeod was tendered ROFR, which is right of first refusal. He's the only one of the restricted free agents the Giants have who was tendered. Now, the Giants did try to get a deal done with him. They ran out of time. The deadline was 4:00 on Wednesday. That's when the new league year, which, by the way, happy new league year. That's when the new league year started. So McLeod was tendered, and his tender is, I think, about $2.9 million. It's a little high for a guy who's, basically a special teamer. But look, McLeod was one of their better special teams guys. He also gives some value on defense. He can go in there and play cornerback if you need him to. He was an exceptional gunner, as I mentioned. So I don't really have a problem with them devoting, almost $3 million on him. The Giants re-signed Lawrence Cager, which Cager confirmed on his own social media. I don't know the terms of the deal. I would imagine it's probably like a 1-year deal, if would be my guess, but I haven't seen the numbers yet. They did not tender guard Wyatt Davis. No surprise there. I didn't think they would. And they did not tender Isaiah Hodgins. They did try to re-sign Hodgins, but I think, from what I understand, the deal they were looking to give him was I think it was a 1-year deal for about 1.5 million, and most of that money would have come through playtime incentives. And Hodgins just wasn't interested. And, quite honestly, I'm surprised that they even, wanted him back because again, the receiver class in this draft class is so deep that I just thought, okay, maybe they won't go and get him back and they'll move on, especially after we saw Hodgins kind of fade from the scene last year. So anyway, Hodgins is now an unrestricted free agent and doesn't look like he's going to be back. All right, now coming up next, what else do the Giants need to do? We'll talk about that right after this. Hey, Giant fans, if you're having trouble finding those last-minute tickets to your favorite concert shows and sporting events, Game Time has you covered. They offer a wide selection of seats complete with seat views to help you decide where to sit, and they're constantly offering last-minute tickets through flash deals. There are no hidden fees. You'll know exactly what your deal is before you check out. And Game Time even has tickets available as late as an hour after an event starts, making it truly the best place to find last minute deals at amazing prices. Want more reasons to trust Game Time? They offer event cancellation protection. And if you find tickets in the same section and row for less elsewhere, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So go on and take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Terms apply. That app is Game Time, and that promo code for $20 off your first purchase is Locked On. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and we're still in the midst of free agency today, Wednesday, start of the new league year. So 2024 is officially here as far as the NFL calendar is concerned. And the Giants have been keeping me really busy between the podcast here, the videos, the shorts that I've been putting up, and of course the work over on Giants Country, which I hope you've been checking out. We've really been working hard to crank out content for you. So appreciate you, as always, tuning in. And coming up on the Locked On Giants podcast, I'm going to have a bonus episode for you. I don't know if you folks remember, but a few weeks ago, I had, actually back when Carmen Brasillo was hired, I had a gentleman by the name of Hondo Carpenter on the podcast. Hondo is my colleague over on Fan Nation. He is the site publisher for the Raiders site, and he's very well connected within the Raiders organization. So he came on. He had some, some stuff to share about Carmen Brasillo. He talked a little bit about Jermaine Eluemunor, who we're going to hear from Q in the next segment. And he also was comparing notes with me as to what he heard at the Combine regarding some of the Giants' plans or prospective plans for the draft. So that's going to be a bonus episode. Just got to get that edited for you, and then we'll get that out and have that coming your way. So that's coming up. And then, of course, we'll just keep on bringing you the content as the Giants make news. And trust me, they're making some waves here. We still need to talk about the numbers, the salary cap numbers, which I don't have all the numbers in yet. Once I get them, I'll go over that. And then we got to grade the free agency haul, right? So plenty to do here on the Locked On Giants podcast. All right, on this segment, what is left for General Manager Joe Schoen to do? Now, obviously, some of the things are going to be addressed in the draft. But if you remember back at the Combine, Joe Schoen said that the roster was going to look significantly different once they got through free agency, and that free agency could influence how they proceed in the draft. So what's left to do, and how might free agency have affected what the Giants are going to do in the draft? All right, so I made a short list here. Obviously, wide receiver one, still very much a need. That's coming from the draft. That never, wasn't any doubt. Quarterback, even though the Giants signed Drew Lock to be the backup for Daniel Jones. And by the way, I still think the Giants should have a competition amongst all the quarterbacks. Don't necessarily just hand the job to Daniel Jones and say, here you go. That's putting the kid on scholarship. And I know about, the the rough times he's had and everything like that. But look, make these guys start to earn their money and their jobs, all right? Unless you're an Andrew Thomas or a Dexter Lawrence or a Bobby Okereke and you're playing lights out, everybody else should compete, in my opinion. So that's something that, I'd like to see happen. Whether or not they do it, that's another story. But so the Giants, I think, still need a quarterback. Now, there's some debate here whether the Giants need a top guy or can they get by with a developmental prospect. I think it's going to be somewhere in the middle. As I said on yesterday's program, I think what the Giants are going to do is I don't know that they're going to be in a position to take one of the top guys, even if they stay at 6. I don't think they're going to trade up. I just feel that, they still have needs they need to address. Now, some people say, well, they addressed some of them, so maybe they can give up some more draft assets. I don't know. I'd rather see them trade down, to be honest with you. Get the receiver, and then if need be, trade back up into the the bottom of the first round and get your quarterback. But I think, if you're looking at quarterback for the Giants, I don't know if J.J. McCarthy is going to be there. I know he's a guy that a lot of people I've spoken with feel is on the Giants' radar and that they really want him. I don't know if they'll be able to get him. So I think, like I said on the other day, I think a Bo Nix or a Michael Penix Jr. or even a Spencer Rattler might make more sense for the Giants. I don't know. I just don't see them trading up. But as Joe Schoen continues to fill in some of these holes on the roster, maybe he says, okay, you know what? I don't need all these draft picks. I'm going to trade up and I'm going to get the guy I want. So still a little too early to tell, I think, because I don't think Shane is done. I think he's done the bulk of what he's going to do in free agency, but I still would not be surprised if there's a couple more moves coming. So quarterback, definitely a position that they need to address. Running back 2, I'm going to call it running back 2. All right. Even though the Giants are going to go to a committee approach this year, they're not going to necessarily have a bell cow. So Devin Singletary, who they signed as a free agent after losing Saquon Barkley, I think he's going to be like the first up in the order, and then they still need an RB2, and then maybe Eric Gray and Gary Brightwell can fill in the rest of the committee. But if they could get a power back, and I know A.J. Dillon was linked to the Giants, if they could get a power back, that would be a nice combination, to have a guy like A.J. Dillon and Devin Singletary back there, almost reminiscent of Thunder and Lightning back in the day. They haven't had that. And I just think that would be a nice 1-2 punch if they can somehow get a big power back. So running back 2. Now, I had also heard early on that fullback might be on the docket, but the Giants are looking at, a potential blocking tight end. Former Bronco Chris Manhertz, all right, was mentioned as a possibility. As I record this, I don't think Manhertz has shown up in New Jersey. I think he was on his way to New Jersey, but they do need another blocking tight end. Daniel Bellinger last year, blocking kind of slacked off a little bit. It wasn't as good. And, regardless of what happens with Darren Waller, they've got to add some more depth there, even though, they signed or re-signed Lawrence Cager. That position to me is still kind of a weak link right now. So that's something they definitely need to shore up. It looks like they're going to be okay with defensive line depth. Looks like they're going to, try and roll with Jordan Riley, DJ Davidson. Obviously, Dexter Lawrence will be in there. They have Raheem Nunez-Roches. So, it looks like they'll be okay there. I'd like to see them get, let me see, receiver, I said draft. Edge rusher now, they've got Brian Burns to go with Azeez Ojulari and Kayvon Thibodeau. If Azeez Ojulari can stay healthy, fingers crossed, they might just have something there. Inside linebacker, I think they'll be okay there. They've got Okereke, obviously, and Micah McFadden. Also, Darian Beavers is going to compete, obviously, for a role there. Cornerback, they're still trying to sort out cornerback 2, as I mentioned. So I think that's going to come from the draft. And the beauty of that actually is because this defensive coordinator, Shane Bowen, does not play a lot of man-to-man coverage, they can probably plug one of the young guys back there. if they're going to play more zone coverage, because zone coverage is a little easier, I think, for a quarterback to play than man-to-man coverage. So, you know, basically the Giants, the roster, the holes are starting to fill up. And, we'll see how it progresses over the next few days. I do think, again, more signings are coming. Nothing major, basically like minor blips on the scale, but important ones nonetheless. Think in terms of special teams. But, Shane wasn't kidding when he said that the roster was going to have a much different look after free agency. And, for me, the big question again is going to be, did they do enough to where maybe he now feels comfortable to trade up to get a quarterback? I still don't think he does it. Would I be shocked if he did it? No. I think also if he does trade up, it's going to tell us a lot about how they feel about Daniel Jones. And, the NFL Network had a report out that there is still concern about Daniel Jones, the injury history. And, some critics are like, well, Jones played behind a bad line, yada, yada, yada. Yeah, we get all that. But the concern, and it's interesting because I was having this conversation with somebody and they said, well, what about Phil Simms? You remember Phil Simms and how, early on in his career, he was always injured? Yeah, but Phil Simms never had neck injuries. Little different story there. Daniel Jones has had 2 neck injuries in 3 years. So, yeah, I would think there would be some concern. It's almost akin to, if God forbid he had 2 concussions, so close together. So I do believe that there is concern for Daniel Jones, not just can he get back to being what he was in 2022, but if he takes one more wrong hit, you hope that he does not have to suffer in any way, shape, or form. But, look, he plays the game tough. He's got to learn to play it smarter, in my opinion. And I think if, God forbid, he takes one more hit the wrong way, I don't even want to think about it for the young man. I really don't, because I don't want to see that happen. But if you're the Giants, you've got to give some thought to it, because if you don't take a quarterback and you don't plan for that, guess what? Now you're going to set yourself back, because next year's class, from all indications, is not as deep as this year's class. So it's kind of like get a quarterback now, develop him. And if Jones, toughens up and doesn't have any more injury issues, and he balls out, then hey, what a great problem for the Giants to have, right? So yeah, the Giants still have some work to do, but a lot of holes overall filled in for this team. And we just need to see how it all comes together, because obviously trophies are not won in March from free agency activity. All right, coming up next, your boy Q, host of Locked On Raiders, joins me as we talk about Jermaine Eluemunor, the new offensive guard / tackle that the Giants signed. So please don't go anywhere. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and in this segment, we have your boy Q. He is our Locked On Raiders host, and he's going to fill us in on Giants' new guard / tackle, Jermaine Eluemunor. Q, welcome.
Thanks for having me on the show. I'll tell you right now that I think you guys are going to enjoy Germaine. He's a good dude. Obviously, it's all about what he does on the field, but just in general, he's a good dude. He's a cultured dude. He'll enjoy talking to the fans and talking to the media. So he's a guy that the Raiders are going to definitely miss, especially with his versatility. That's not with the team anymore. So the Giants got a good one in Eluemunor.
Let's talk about what he brings to the field. You know, I think he's been with the Raiders or was with the Raiders for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Can you just talk about the development? I mean, those 2 years that he was there, obviously he was with Carmen Brasillo, who's now with the Giants. Can you just talk about, how he developed as a player and where's his best position, do you think?
I think that his best position is probably right guard, but the fact that he has the ability to be multiple positions is what really makes him valuable. He could be right guard. He could be right tackle. He can go to the left tackle if has to be, right? I mean, he could be literally that Swiss Army knife, and that's what he prides himself in, is being able to do all of that. Just wherever you need Jermaine Eluemunor, he's going to go and do his best that he can. And the first year that he was with the Raiders, he had a few penalties, and we're all like, I don't know about this guy. He's got false starts, and he's got some holding penalties, and he's got to be able to clean this thing up. But he really took a lot of pride. He heard all the criticism. Players always say that we don't hear the outside noise. He admitted, we hear all the outside noise. He heard all the criticism, and he went to work. And the one thing I can say about Jermaine Eluemunor is he is a very smart guy. I think that's probably the best thing that you can, the best compliment you can give him. He's very smart, and he knows who his opponent is. And so what he does is, as a tactician, he's going to know how he's got to attack this guy, that guy, or the other. And 90% of the time, he's, on point. There'll be some times where he gets beat, and, he'll say that he saw that swim move coming, or he knew that, that inside out move was coming, or he'll tell you exactly what happened. He just wasn't able to stop it on that rep. But for the most part, I mean, again, he's a versatile guy. His best position probably is guard, but I think he'll probably tell you that his best position is right tackle.
What about, they say that sometimes a player, when he's worked with an offensive line coach or any coach for that matter, takes on some of the personality of the coach. Did you see that?
Yeah, a little bit. It's funny. In training camp this past year, there was times where Germaine wouldn't be with the whole crew, like the whole offensive line. And I'm a body language guy. So I was watching body language, and I kept thinking, what is going on with Germaine? Is he locked in? Is he not feeling this? And I didn't want to put words in his mouth, and I didn't want to speculate either, because I just didn't know. And it's just kind of like his personality. Like, he'll take the criticism, he'll take it really well, he'll take it to heart as well, where he's going to try to build on it. But he's not just going to be one of those guys where, he's just kind of laughs it off and doesn't worry about it. Like, he's really attention to detail type guy. Let's put it like that. And that's exactly who Carmen Brasillo is. He's a very attention to the detail. He wants things done the right way. If not, do it again. I mean, he's hard on his players. He coaches them up hard. He says there's not anyone who's going to coach him up harder, but there's also nobody's going to love him harder either. So that's who Carmen Brasillo is. And that's who Jermaine Eluemunor is. He's going to be hard on himself. He expects himself to play at a high level. And I remember when he signed his 1-year deal last season, before the season with the Raiders, and he said, me and Colton Miller are going to be the best tackle duo, in the league. And I remember looking at it I don't know if you guys are going to be the best, just because we just didn't know about Germaine. But I'll tell you, he did everything he could in his ability to be the very best he could. And it wasn't always perfect, but for the most part, he was pretty spot on.
Sometimes you get an older veteran and they're a little reluctant to help younger teammates, especially if a younger teammate is someone they're in competition with. How is Germaine in that regard?
I think he was pretty good. We saw that a little bit with him and Thayer Munford. He was a 7th-round pick out of Ohio State. Now he's gone, through 2 seasons now with the Raiders. But, you kind of saw it a little bit where he had to, split reps with them. And, I thought that was some competition that was there in training camp. And, Germaine gave him a few tips here and there. He wasn't really the most, like the teacher or whatever, but you would see him give tips here and there. And you could tell that the whole offensive line bunch was a tight knit bunch. So even though he was kind of a little quirky, he was a little bit different than, he wasn't your typical O-line where they're all together all the time, like even in practice and everything. But for the most part, he was pretty much locked in with his guys. So I think that, he might not be the best teacher, but I think he'll provide tips here and there. Let's put it like that.
Where does Germaine have to get better, do you think, still in his game?
Just making sure that he does like the small details, right? Penalties, he'll still get a penalty here and there. There'll be a, especially on, 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1, he's gotten some false starts that are just drive killers. You know that. I mean, all of a sudden it turns into 4th and 6, and now you have to punt instead of go for it. He's done that a few times. He's got to learn to hold his water just a little bit better. For the most part, he's cleaned up his holding penalty. So I think that that's a lot better. But I just think that really the false starts is what got him more times than not. And it wasn't a whole lot. It was just at the worst time, right? I mean, it's one thing when it's the first quarter and it's, first in or second in like 3 or something like that. Even that's not a good penalty. But, right when you're trying to pick up a big play and get the momentum really on your side, all of a sudden to have a penalty that kills the drive and you have to punt, that's probably the biggest thing for him.
So far on social media, I mean, he's just come across as a sweetheart of a guy. He's engaged with the fans, very enthusiastic, keeps talking about how excited he is. What about his on the field demeanor? Obviously, you want somebody who's not necessarily a sweetheart, somebody who's got a little bit of a mean streak to him. What's his demeanor on the field?
Oh, yeah, he's got the nasty to him on the field. I mean, he really does. I remember before the Raiders played the Chiefs, we talked to him in the locker room. They were headed to Kansas City for that Christmas Day game, which the Raiders won. And he was talking about how the last game, the Raiders were up by 14 and they lost. And he said, yeah, it's the Chiefs. Yeah, they're the Super Bowl champs. So what, right? We were punching them in the mouth and we just stopped punching in the mouth. We ain't scared of them. And you could see his kind of his demeanor. Like you said, he's a nice guy on social media. He's a great guy in the locker room, but you could see his attitude type kind of change almost to like he was in game mode. And, he's even thinking, he's like, man, even talking about it just makes me want to get out there right now. And, those guys aren't that tough. And I'm not worried about none of those guys on the defensive line. And we'll punch them in the mouth and we'll, run them over. And Josh Jacobs is going to get this, that, and the other. He's going to get 100 yards. And that was another thing that stood out to me about Jermaine Eluemunor. There was a stretch where Josh Jacobs hadn't got 100 yards rushing all season long. And then he had one game that was really good and he got to 102 yards. And then one more play came and they handed it to JJ and he lost a couple of yards. So he ended up with 99. And I talked to Germaine in the locker room right after that game. And I said, hey, man, the offensive line did really well. I can't remember who it was against, whatever team it was, but it was a team that has a really good defensive line. I think it might have been the Chargers. And he said, did Josh Jacobs get 100 yards? Like, that was the first thing out of his mouth. Did JJ get 100 yards? And I said, man, he got 99. And he was angry. He was like, man, we were supposed to get him 100 yards. That's what our goal was. That's what we said we were going to do. He was going to get 100 yards. That's on us. It's not on him. And I was like, well, he had it, but then he lost that on that last play. He lost a couple yards. That's our fault. And he took it pretty personal. So he gets that, when it's in game mode, he gets that anger and that determination and exactly what you want from an offensive lineman, right? You don't want him to be backing down. You don't want him to be buddy with anybody. He's not the guy that you're going to see exchanging jerseys with guys after the game or anything. He'll go to the locker room and he'll either be upset after a loss or be happy after a win. But he's that dude that on the field, he's going to have that nasty streak to him.
Sometimes when a guy comes to a new team, he's a little, what's the word I want? Not, I guess reserved is the best word for him. How do you think he'll do? I mean, the team reconvenes I think it's April 15th for the start of the offseason program. Some guys, they go through a feeling out process. How do you think he'll adjust to his new teammates?
I think he'll adjust pretty quickly. I see on social media, like you see, that he's excited to be a Giant, right? Just because of the nostalgia of the New York Giants and the big blue helmet, as he's been calling it, and everything. I mean, he's pumped up to be a Giant. I think him having Carmen Brasillo there is going to help a lot as well, right? I think that's going to help ease him in. Again, he's not the most vocal guy. He's not like the class clown or anything where he's look at me. So he's not going to be that guy that's just going to walk in and, be the life of the party. But I think with Carmen Brasillo being there, I think that's going to help kind of ease him into what his new surroundings are going to look like and be like on the daily. So I think Germaine will be fine. And I think that the teammates around him are going to really embrace him because there's one thing he wants to do. He wants to win and he wants to play at a high level.
Final question for you, Q. I mean, sometimes people want to know, who does this guy remind you of? And Jermaine's been in the league a number of years
Yeah.
now, so maybe I don't know if it's fair to go back and pull a similar guy who from the yesteryear. But when you think of the old offensive linemen, the throwbacks, when football was all about ground and pound and
Right.
all that stuff, how well do you think he would have fit into that era?
Yeah, I think he would have been okay. I really do. I think that he probably would embrace it a little bit more because he feels like he could get away with more, right? So he didn't have to be so by the book like it is these days. I mean, look, he thrives on physicality. He really does. He wants to put the pain on different guys. I mean, he knows what these other defensive linemen, what their accolades are. Who's the superstars, who's the ones that everyone's getting the headlines about, and he wants to prove who he is. Like he's just. He's not going to be a superstar. He's not going to be a Pro Bowler. He's just going to go in there and just do his job. I mean, that's just what it is. There's multiple times where you see him get banged up and he might come out of the game for a quick play and then he's back. I mean, that's the one thing. He's a tough dude. I think that they got a really good player. Again, he's not going to be somebody that you all of a sudden you'll anoint him as the captain or he's a Pro Bowler, but he'll do his job. He'll play physical and he'll do what's asked of him, which is most important.
I know I can't wait till he gets here because already he's, like I said, he's winning the hearts over of Giant fans with his enthusiasm, which I've never really seen in a newcomer coming to a team. I mean, he's already got his jersey number picked out. I think he's going to be 72. He's talking about the helmet and all that stuff. And I just think, it's refreshing to see such enthusiasm. A lot of guys, they, especially when they come from the old team, they're like, they still refer to that old team as we, and he's already referring to the Giants as we. So can't wait to meet him. Can't wait to see him on the field. Q, appreciate all the insight. As always, you are the best, my friend.
Hey, no problem, no problem. Tell Germaine I said what up. Say Q said hello because he's a good dude.
I definitely will. We got a lot of people from Las Vegas who told me to say what's up for him. So
there you
all
go.
Right, Giant fans, that's going to do it for us on today's Locked On Giants podcast. Keep it here the rest of the week. We'll have plenty more to cover. We've got so much that we need to cover still, and I'm going to bring it all to you for your boy Q. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day, or if you watch on YouTube, your first watch of the day. And I'll see you tomorrow, Giant fans.